most of you are retailers in the room. So as we're setting up the questions, and I do want to thank Matt Willey specifically from the Florida Restaurant Association for helping craft these questions. They're generated with you in mind. So as we go through this, please write down any follow-up questions you may have, and we'll have time for the audience. So as we begin, Joey, we'll start with you. Joey, from crisp American light lagers to increasingly assertive IPAs to soul-crushing sours, the American beer palate has run the gambit over the last 15 years. What do you think what's next for the beer drinker?
As far as new trends, sour beers are gaining a lot of popularity, and I think Florida brewers have really embraced the Blennerweisse style, which is an esoteric style that was brewed in Berlin, and it's basically a sour wheat ale. But there's something about that lactic acid tartness that can be very refreshing. It sounds a little off-putting at first, but I mean, think of eating yogurt and it has that acidophilus tartness. It actually can be quite refreshing, especially when you balance it with a little bit of fruit, some sweetness to round it out. So I think that the funkier the wild ales are certainly gaining some ascendancy. They're still very much a niche within a niche, but those kind of beers and increasingly, I think when you look at a customer, you just have to understand now that you're gonna have to have more arrows in your quiver. There's just, I came at craft brewing as very much as a customer. I didn't set out to open a brewery. I just got tired of not being able to get the beer I wanted, so I just figured out how to make it and then figured out how to make money making it. But I know just as a consumer, you have different moods. What I want to drink in the winter is going to be different than what I want to drink in the summer. I'm definitely looking for something a little heartier, a porter or a stout or something like that come winter. So, as a retailer, you want to offer a wide enough selection so that you can generally satisfy every palate. And it can be daunting. It may seem like you have to carry 100 beers to do that. You don't really. You can group a lot of things into sort of a catch-all. One dark malty beer, one well-balanced hoppy beer. You have world classics like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. You may have over-the-top hopheads, but they're still going to appreciate a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So if you have limited tap space, limited shelf space, really the next trend is a more educated retailer realizing, look, you can't carry everything. What is enough to satisfy most of the people? That's what's really been a sea change for me. I remember if I went out with a group of my friends, I'd be lucky if they had some dusty old German Pilsner, that I could drink that no one had ordered in months now. Or I'd drag my friends to the one craft beer bar in the area, beg them to drink around with me, and then we'd go to the other bars where they didn't have anything. Now, pretty much anywhere you go, you're going to find something craft-wise, and I think that is what the trend is. That's going to continue. It's going to continue to sort of widen, and then people will sort of break out into the specialties of the things they like. I tend to be a pale ale, porter, stout guy. I'm going to continue to go down that road, and I think most consumers are generally going to be that way. They'll experiment with many styles, but people tend to stick with the areas of the things they like, and I think that's the trend that you're going to see, is that people start to, after they've done the exploration, they start to fall in their flavor slot.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I'm hearing assortments and the direction that we need to go, especially for the retailers in the room. How do you balance your specific environments? For the rest of the panelists, any other follow-ups on what you see emerging in the next couple of years? And Ed, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think one other trend that we've been seeing as well is really a return to sessionability. There's been a lot of entry over the past 15 to 20 years, a discovery of craft, and as the discovery takes place, you start at maybe a Blue Moon Belgian White, and then you move on to something that's an IPA, has bitterness, and then before long you're drinking barrel-aged imperial stouts and imperial IPAs that have 1,000 IBUs, bitterness units. What we've been seeing is that really there's a trend that has been coming back to sessionability. Session IPAs is one that we've really seen. You get that bitterness that you really enjoy from an IPA, but you can actually drink 2, 3, or 4 of them in a sitting. One trend that we've seen with some of the smaller brewers as well is craft lagers. That's one that really provides sessionability, drinkability, but really has a flavor profile that is clean, crisp, refreshing, and we've been seeing that across the board with a number of different brewers out there.
Good. Fran, I saw you shaking your head on that. Any additional comments on that?
No, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing, but I also find that the trends are that once people start getting into the craft, I see them, again, in my place, that they'll start bumping to another one, and I see them moving around more, where I think traditionally it used to be I only drank the IPA, I only drank that, but now I think it's going to move around. And then you have the people coming into the drinking world that are just starting, and let's say sours are big right now, and so that's their popular beer. Well, down the road, then it's going to be a porter because they've never really had that. So I think beers are going to keep rotating around.
Yeah. Tom, anything?
I think along with what Joey said about Berliner Weiss, Kolsch is another hot one, and what Ed said about session IPAs. I also think we're going to see a lot more, continue to see collaborations. I think we'll see a lot more collaboration with European brewers, as American craft beers are very hot over there. The European brewers are looking to partner up with us, and we're looking to tie into their history and heritage as well. So I think you'll see more collaborations with the old world.
Good. All right. That one thing I forgot to mention, after each question is kind of a beer drinking game. Everybody has to drink a drink. All right, so that's one. There you go. All right, question number 2, Ed, this is for you. Given its rapid growth, specifically around craft beers, do you see a bubble in the beer industry, specifically like the craft movement?
Yeah, so Bob, when you hear the term bubble, a lot of times your mind goes to a couple events recently. So everyone remembers the dot-com bubble from the year 1999-2000. A lot of rapid growth, and then it all came tumbling down really quickly. And then more recently, the housing bubble, and we saw what happened there. As it relates to a beer bubble, having the same experience, I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
But which is a good thing, obviously. But I think that there's really 2 ways to look at this question. The first one is from the supplier and retailer standpoint, and Joey hit on this a little bit as well. You know, there's the Brewers Association just came out with the number of breweries that are existing in the U.S. It's now 3,700 breweries, and we haven't seen that since the late 1880s, 1890s. And there's an additional 1,800 that are basically in formation, so that will be coming soon. That's much more rapid growth than we're seeing in terms of the number of tap handles or the amount of shelf space at retail. So how does that actually work out? I think that there's going to be continued rotation within tap handles, but I think that right now what we're seeing is there's a number of winners in craft, a number of openings, and not as many closings. In fact, it was 13-1 last year, openings to closings. I think that number is really going to dwindle down because you're going to have the need for growth, and just the supply at the retail level may not be there and may not be able to keep up with that growth rate. But the other side is really from the consumer side, and I think this is where the demand will continue to grow, particularly for craft. A lot of what we've been seeing is from the millennial drinker, and millennials grew up on variety. I'm in the Gen X, and I remember when I bought Gatorade, there were 3 flavors. And check out a shelf now and see how many flavors of Gatorade are out there and how many there have been for the last 10, 15 years. We're seeing the same thing happen with craft. And if you think about it, millennials are defined, well, there are a few definitions, but it's basically 1980 to 2000. There's still a number of millennials that haven't even reached the legal drinking age and will be coming into the beer category. And the second piece of it is that as those millennials get older, the highest proportion of craft is actually within the ages of 28 to 34. Partially because they have more money to spend on craft and they have more disposable income. So I really think the demand, particularly for craft, is going to continue. The last thing I'll note is we've seen this in a lot of different industries as well. Take a look at coffee. If I asked you 20 years ago, would people be paying $5 for a cup of coffee? You'd think I was crazy, but take a look at where we are now. You've seen it across the board. People are trading up and really spending those disposable dollars on the premium product.
Oh, thank you. That was question number 2. We have 32 questions, people, so you might as well get used to it. All right. Tom, as a follow-up to that, can the beer industry and really the suppliers keep up with the innovation?
Well, first I'd like to say that I think the actual bubble existed between 1933, when Prohibition was repealed, and 1976. That was the bubble when there wasn't a lot of breweries in America.
Great point.
You know, up to that point, there was thousands, and now we're back to the way things should be. So that's how I feel about the bubble.
Yeah, good for you. Yep, I agree.
I do think that, you know, there'll be continued growth in the craft beer industry. I think first and foremost it has to be about quality. It's going to be about innovation. It's access to market. There's going to be some people that are going to be local and stay local, and that's all they want to be, is they want to be the local beer. And there's some regional players, and there's some national players. I think there's going to be some, more American beers going internationally. Joey keeps on expanding to other markets, and I think it's just a trend of things to come. So, some breweries, won't grow as quick and as fast, but, access to market, Ed brought that up. It's going to be important. There is a limited amount of space. I think it is, before space used to be an issue, I think more retailers have found room in their bars to offer consumers more variety, because consumers are looking for more variety. They're looking for things that pair well with the food that they're eating, and the styles that the local brewers are making.
Yeah, again, the draft handle is growing from 6 to 12 to 24 to 40 plus. So yeah, I see your point.
I think you can have any number of handles that you want, as long as you can keep the beer fresh and that you turn it over in basically in 30 days. After that, we all know that draft beer goes kind of flat. So put as many handles on as you want, as long as you can turn the beer.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. We all believe in quality, and I think that's something from the retailer's point of view. When we talk about cleaning your lines and doing all those things, it's really the right thing for your business, and that's why we continually push that and educate you on why we do it. We're just not trying to push more beer through the line. We'll take it, but that's not the reason we do it. All right, let's keep moving on. Drink number, there you go. Yeah, you guys are picking this up. All right, Fran, to my favorite math teacher on the panel. How is the eat local, drink local movement affecting breweries and consumers?
Well, I think it's been a good thing for us, and I think a lot of breweries, because that push for people to go out and search for a beer has saved me in marketing, that's for sure, because everyone is looking for that next beer. So I can put my, I can be off the grid a little bit farther. Don't have to be right out there where everybody sees it. So it saves me, so I can cut costs a little bit and keep, prices down. So I see it as a good thing. The follow-up is that what actually is local.
Right.
And that's getting a little bit tighter, because it's like, I remember when, just if it was brewed in the U.S., it was local. And then it's the East Coast, and it's now it's Georgia's local, and then Florida, now Tampa, and then now it's got to be brewed next door. So it's getting tighter and tighter on the local. So the brew local, I don't know. Maybe I should change to brew Florida or drink Florida or something like that. I think it's going to get so tight that it's going to have to come back out a little bit on it. But in general, it's helped. I mean, to me, it's helped a lot. People search out different beers, which helps any retailer, is when you put that new beer on or something, you got people looking for it.
Thank you, Fran. Joey, next question's for you. Traditional brown liquors like whiskey and bourbons are continuing their explosive growth over the last few years. In what way do you see that affecting the beer industry, specifically brewers in general?
The most obvious thing is obviously barrel aging beer in spent whiskey barrels. That's become quite common. In fact, I can't think of a brewery off the top of my head that hasn't done at least some level of barrel aging. It's just a natural extension. It's just something that works really well. Specifically, Kentucky bourbon, and a nice stout. It just goes together so well. So you see that happen, and then the experimentation has increased beyond just Kentucky bourbon barrels. We've probably used every type of barrel under the sun. We've used tequila, every type of rum, Calvados, you name it. If they put it in a barrel, we've tried to put beer into that barrel after they got their spirits out. But increasingly, you're starting to see a lot of cross-promotion. We've done some cross-promotion both with national small batch distillers and local. Wicked Dolphin is a distillery that does a line of rums here in South Florida, and we actually just got some barrels in yesterday that previously had our beer in them, and then they aged their rum in them, and then now they've come back to us to put beer back in. So we just kind of close that loop. We only use our barrels once, so we've been really looking for a local distillery that we could give our spent barrels to, so they could put their spirits in, and kind of close that loop. I believe it's Berkshire Distillery up in the Northeast in Massachusetts area. We did some cross promotion with them on a beer that we had aged beer in, and then sent them the barrel up, and then they rested a whiskey in it. So that you're starting to see that the craft distillers and the craft breweries are seeing that they're kind of brothers in arms, and that they can kind of cross promote. And I think craft brewers we're just a little more comfortable with the fact that we know our consumer is promiscuous, and we know he's sometimes going to want a whiskey and not a beer, and we're comfortable with that. We don't have to sell him everything. He doesn't have to have Cigar City Brewing shirt on while he drinks a Cigar City beer, while he wears his Cigar City underwear and eats his Cigar City hot dog. I can sell him a product, here and there, and that works for us, and it works for him, and that's the way it should be. So, speaking with collaborations and, be it within the beer industry, and, we've collaborated with Buddy Brew Coffee. We reach out to other companies to kind of get our name out there, but we understand, that our consumer, he's not always going to be thinking about our product. He's thinking about all the things in his life that he enjoys, and we want him, if we can expose him to things that we found that we think are cool, like Wicked Dolphin Distillery, then, we've turned him on to something he didn't know about, and we think he'll appreciate that, or her.
Yeah. Tom, a follow-up on that, you mentioned collaboration. How does that work with your brands and other brewers? How do you really work on building a beer up, creating a beer from scratch?
What was the last part?
How do you create a beer collaborating with another brewer? What's the process that kind of goes into that?
Well, I think in the case of Cigar City, our director of sales reached out to Joey and Justin, who's in the audience. It's about quality. It's about what they're doing in the marketplace. It's about point of difference. And so, we search out for quality partners.
Yep.
The brewery that we did the Oktoberfest with has been around for 700 years. They're one of the most award-winning breweries in Germany. So I think it's, finding the right partner. Finding somebody that's got quality, some history, some heritage. They're doing the right things in the marketplace.
Yep, starts with a phone call. That's great. All right, Ed, let's go over back to you. Beer in general really is a predominantly skews male, all right, male demographic. But more and more we're seeing women trying and loving beer and ciders in specific geographies. Where do you see it going in the next couple of years? Is it we're going to go toward more for the women, or is it just going to be focused against the male demographic?
Yeah. So I've got another stat from you. You could probably tell from my last answer I like numbers. So I like to call it Say Beer Metrics for you baseball fans out there. So one of the things that we found is that last year, for the first time, craft actually over-indexed with women, which basically meant that per occasion, women were drinking more craft beer than men were. So basically for 100 beers that were drank by a man or for a woman, women drank more proportional beer than the man did. The difference is that males drink more in general, so that's why you do have that domination. What we have seen, though, is that there are two entry points. The first one is sessionable styles. So we have a couple of beers that really do play into that. So Summer Shandy over-indexes with women, as does Blue Moon Belgian White. And those are really solid entry points before they start their beer journey. And as those entry points do take place, invitational styles and sessionable styles really will come to the forefront. The second one, you mentioned this in your question, was cider. And wine is another alcohol beverage that really over-indexes with women. Cider really is made similarly to cider, to wine. It uses apples or pears in this case, as opposed to grapes. So we do see that that's another opportunity for entry into the beer and cider space. The other thing to note about cider is that it is gluten-free, and that's really a good opportunity as we go forward to retail. Speaking with the Restaurant Association, many of your customers obviously probably do have gluten allergies, and that's a really good opportunity going forward.
Good, thank you. Kind of want to move this into a quality question, because that's something we see a lot on the TV. Everybody wants to own quality, and Fran, I'll put this over to you. Quality beer messaging is all over the airwaves right now, with everybody wanting and claiming to own quality. When someone talks about the quality made beer, what does that mean to you specifically?
Yeah, it's kind of a open kind of question on that, but I think what they're talking about, or what we talk about in the craft, is that we're putting basically the beer ahead of the bottom line. Now, I'm not saying we don't watch the bottom line, you have to, but we may, if I think an ingredient and stuff is going to make a better beer, then I'll go with that even if the cost is up a little bit. So it's like in steaks, making sure you get the better cut and so on, not just trying to decrease it down to look at just the bottom dollar on it. Now, I hesitate when I say that because obviously we're in business, so we got to watch the bottom dollar. But I see in the craft that's I think what people think, that we're paying great attention to, going out and getting that. Now, probably people think I go out and pick 400 pounds of apricots off a tree myself and look at each one, because I've seen commercials of other brewers doing that. But it doesn't work necessarily that way. But it's about trying to keep the beer that goes out of any of our places to make sure it's the top beer that goes, not just good enough. And I think that's kind of where I see the quality part comes from.
And I want to open that up for the rest of the panelists. Anybody else want to mention quality and how they look at it with their brands? Joey?
To me, quality is, and especially as you get bigger, there's something nice. It's nice to have Tawara in a wine and say, oh, the 56 was different than the 57. It's not so nice in beer, at least, what I call grocery store beer. So to me, quality is that when you make a beer, and I'll enjoy that beer, the next time I have it, it's going to be that same beer. So obviously that means that you're not going to have microbial, infestations. You're not going to have, dissolved oxygen in the beer being all over the table and oxidizing your beer. And that is a real challenge for small breweries. They just simply don't have the equipment. And sometimes when you rush and you go into packaging and you don't even have a lab yet, you're using what amounts to hand-built equipment to package beer, things will go wrong. It's not that things might go wrong, things will go wrong. It's, people think of beer more as, as a sturdy packageable product, but if you're not pasteurizing, you're not sterile filtering, you should think of beer more like milk. Would you leave milk sitting out, on a warm shelf for a week? And then would you drink it after that week? So when I think of quality, I think of getting to the point that if you're going to move beyond being just a draft-only brewery where you can control the temperature at all times, that you're investing in the tools that it takes to deliver that experience to the consumer again and again and again with as little deviation as possible. I don't mind if my hop profile deviates a little bit year to year. That's acceptable terroir. You pick your hop lot and you maybe it throws off a little bit more of something than it did in a previous year. That's a good change. That's oh wow, remember the Autonoms were throwing off this lemony note back in 2013 and wasn't that interesting? That's an acceptable deviation, but a deviation of I packaged on Tuesday and my dissolved oxygen was 100 parts per billion and then the next day it was 13. Well, one of those two you shouldn't be packaging. So to me, that's what quality is, and that is definitely something that we've invested a lot in our brewery, and that any brewery that's going to go beyond, being a small local brewery where they can really control where the beer goes and the temperature it's kept at and how it's served, needs to invest in if they want to succeed. There's the great thing about there being so many breweries is there's a lot of breweries making really good beer, and if you're not one of them, people will not buy your beer.
Yeah, that's so true. There are so many breweries out there making really, really good beer right now. Thank you for that. And also want to make sure that everybody is aware that happy hour starts in about 12 minutes, so don't let that prevent you from starting early. All right, so keep drinking. That was question number 7. Thanks for playing. All right, we're going to actually, this will be the last question for the panel, and then I'm going to open it up for questions for the audience. If there's one piece of advice you'd give to the restaurant or restaurateurs or the hoteliers that are in the room to help them sell more beer, what would that one piece of advice to help them make more money? And Ed, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that one of the things that we've been seeing in restaurants and bars is that the establishments that are doing it the best have a healthy mix of the rotational variety, but also having your standard brands that are always on tap. People get used to coming into that establishment and finding that standby that they're used to drinking, and that always needs to be there. But there also has to be that healthy mix to really capture the variety that craft has to offer. So really balancing those two is probably one of the most important things in the beer world these days.
Thank you.
I would say just take away some of the romance and look at the numbers. There's a lot of there's always something new coming out, and it's nice to say, oh, well, that's brand new, I want to put it on, it'll be exciting, and sometimes that is, but if you're taking off something that's really churning and you're going through a lot of that product so you can replace it with something that people might like, you're not looking at the numbers and saying, okay, well, that's not actually a smart decision for the business. If you want to invest in more, then you want to look to expand taps to offer that. I see it in my own business. I run tap rooms, and I love experimentation. That's why I got into this industry, is because I do want to try the next thing. But I'm not going to take High Life off on my own tap so I can put this blueberry oak thing that I dreamed up one night so I can get that on there just to try it. Do the numbers. If someone says try this, just say, look, well, how much am I selling of this versus how much I suspect I might sell of that? Or if you try it, track it. I think a lot of times people don't actually do the math. They just throw something new on because it's new, or they take maybe a deal that someone is offering them to take it in. But if you're not actually turning the keg, then you didn't get anything out of that. So I just take the emotion out of it and just look at the raw numbers. At the end of the day, everyone's running a business, and the numbers have to work out. That's a way of keeping score of whether or not you made a good decision, is whether the numbers are positive.
Yep. Great point. Brian?
I agree with the numbers, and actually what they said. I find that the off weird beers is what brings them in. Like to my place, they come in, what's new, but they tend to get them on a flight, and then they just go back and get their regular draft, and that's what I'm selling pints of, and pints is where I'm making the money. I'm making the money off of the return. The people that stop after work, there's a lot of people that are tired after work and don't want to experiment. It's just like going to a restaurant that you're comfortable with, you just know what the food is. So I find in my place, like I say, agreeing with them, that I've always got to have something a little new, but I still got to have those standard beers where they can sit down and drink, because again, it's about the numbers. Selling 4 pints is better than selling one okra oyster beer or something like that.
That's one of my favorites.
I was going to say, you can have that one, Joey. I'm working on swamp cabbage.
We'll see that on the shelf soon. Tom?
I think it's having a good mix of local, regional, and national beers. To agree with what everybody else said, I think it's also good to have a variety of styles. So if you only have 6 taps, you should have a porter, a stout, a pale ale, an IPA, a wheat beer, Hefeweizen, and a cider or whatever. So I think having a good amount of styles that pair well with different foods and take care of a lot of different consumers is important. And I think quality is important as well. I think that you should choose wisely, and like the other people had said, numbers speak for themselves, and it's important to keep on selling what people are drinking. So.
Yeah, the consumer really makes the final decision, right, on all of our brands.
They do.
That's
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. At this time, we're going to actually turn it up, questions over to the audience. So, Matt, who has the microphone? Oh, there it is. We're going to start right over here. And if you could just direct your question to the panelists, please.
Can we get some more beer at this table?
Absolutely. You've been
Excellent
playing,
question.
and I appreciate that. More beer. Done. All right, let's go back to the next question. Let's start over here.
Yeah, you're seeing different glassware for all these beers, like Pilsner pints, these brandy snifter looking glasses and whatever. Is there a reason for that, or is there I know obviously with red wines and white wines there are, but is it the same with beer or what?
Who wants to grab that one? Joey?
Yes, there's a lot of science, and I was a bit of a skeptic, but I actually sat down and did the Spiegelau blind aroma tasting and flavor tasting, and I was blown away by what a difference there is. Just different shapes of glasses channel differently, and Some aromas you want to air out. You take a big red wine, you want to air it out, let it open up a little bit. Others, like IPAs, you want to concentrate the aroma so it really gets you right in the nose. So yeah, they do have a purpose. And honestly, I was a skeptic, and then I became so convinced that we actually switched hard from not carrying pint glasses at all. Everything goes into the right glass now, because I looked at it as, okay, it's kind of a big investment. It's $3, $3.20 a glass or something. But I looked at it as like, oh, how much would I pay to make my beer the experience a customer has if it's 10 or 15% better? If I didn't do anything to my recipe, I didn't do anything to the way I made the beer, but the experience that the customer had was that beer's better than it was in that other glass. How much is that worth? And that's how I made that decision.
Yeah. Ed, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, I think the other thing too is that it really provides a great marketing tool for the beers that you're pouring as well. If you were to get a beer, so let's take Blue Moon Belgian White as an example. If you get that in a shaker pint glass, it just looks like another beer. If you get it in a standard glass that has Blue Moon logoing, and people around the bar see it, other people may say, hey, you know what, that looks attractive to me, and I want to order that beer. So it really does provide a great marketing tool as well. Now, granted, if you have 100 beers on tap, you probably can't have 100 glasses, but having a good assortment that will really meet the demand of the consumer is really important.
You can do it with 4.
Yeah.
A wheat glass,
Yep.
lager glass, IPA glass, and a chalice.
Yep.
But that said, any port in a storm, I'll drink right out of the can if I have to.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Let's go to the young lady at this table.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Now that's a leader in the industry right there, delivering
Thanks, Dan.
beer.
You can drop one here too.
Well played. Thank you, Dan Murphy.
We have a chain of 6 restaurants in the Sarasota-Bradenton area. Is there a magic number that you should have for your draft line as far as how many taps, in your opinions?
No, there's not a magic number, but I feel like you can get it done with 12. 12 gives you enough that you can keep all of what I call, the heritage beers, the world classics. You can keep those all on there, and you still can have 2, 3, 4 beers to keep it fresh and to have some things that rotate. And look at any menu. The special should always be much less than the set menu items. There isn't a magic number. I believe you can do it with 12, but then it really depends on what your clientele is. If your clientele trends heavily craft, then 12's probably not enough. At our own tasting room, I think we strive to aim for 30, but we're making the beer right there. And sometimes we don't always hit that. Sometimes we have less. But no magic number. But that said, again, too, you could get by with 4 if you just really wanted to target. But I do think you're missing opportunities at that point for variety. There is sometimes, I'll drink an IPA or a pale ale most times, but if you only have the IPA, I might have preferred to have the pale ale, and maybe I don't stay as long then,
All right, thank you. Next question, right back here.
Is it on? There we go. My name is Michael. What is the future of the Growlers? Where do you see it going?
Oh, all right. Fran, we're gonna hand that one off to you.
That's a tough. Well, we finally got the 64s, so which actually for us we decreased our gallons because these are a lot easier, and the glassware on the gallons was killing us because I don't think the gallons were really meant to hold carbonated beverages. They tended to break every time they walked out. So the 64s are nice, and they work that way. Do I think there's going to be really much of a change? I still sell a ton of 32s, and I think the special beers, like I said, the bourbon barrel beers, the rum barrel beers, those I sell in the 32s, but the 64s has helped a lot because they're just still big enough that you can serve to more people, but they're still small enough where the gallons would go flat. I hated the gallons on that. But where are we going from there? So you got the Growlers. That's the 32-ounce can. I don't know if you're coming out with the 64-ounce can.
Give them time.
So I don't know. I guess that might be the new thing.
All right. We have anything else out there? Yes, please.
I think people know what big box brewers look like, and we talk a lot about craft beer. Is there any kind of delineation as to what qualifies craft beer, like as much as you produce, or how do we know what a craft beer brewer is?
Well, let me
much time
handle
do we
that
have?
one here, because I would take this off of these guys' plate here. The Craft Brewers Association has a standard definition that they evolve and they change. But I would say in general, and I'll turn this back over to the panel, it's up for the consumers to decide, right? Because we don't label our beers domestic lights, right? We're not screaming that, right? And then when you get into litigation and people are looking at specific brands and why they call themselves a craft beer when they're actually owned by a larger company, there's a lot of litigation going on in that one. And again, I'll turn this back over because everybody kind of wanted to say something on. There's a lot of different points on that one. But I'll tell you, at least from our point, it's the consumer makes that decision.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is really, and this is obviously my point of view, working from the subsidiary Miller Coors, it's in the eyes of the consumer. Many people have had their first craft beer was Blue Moon Belgian White, and we consider that to be craft beer, most certainly. The Leinenkugel family has been, the brewery's been around since the 1860s, started as a small craft brewer, and, their brewery workers work the same as small craft brewers, and they put their heart and soul into it. So certainly craft is in the eyes of the consumer, and we're very proud of what we offer because for many people, the first craft beers they had are in our portfolio.
Any follow-ups to that?
I actually agree wholeheartedly with that it is in the eyes of the consumer. The Brewers Association has a definition, and it does change. And I think to their point, or the point they would make, is that they've invested a lot in growing, craft as a brand. And I think so because they have invested so much in it, both monetarily and emotionally, and blood, sweat, and tears, that they feel it needs to be protected. But I just feel like if you're going to do that, you need to. The goal was it wasn't just to carve out a size brewery that qualifies as craft. It was to fundamentally change the styles of beers that were being produced. So if you have larger brewers that are getting on board with that, I think there should be a bridge that lets you say, okay, maybe they're a large brewery, but those beers are craft beer and they make craft beer because you can make large batches of things that are still handcrafted, and I've drank many a Blue Moon. And I've met Dick Leinenkugel, who's running Leinenkugels now. He's very passionate, about the company that his forebears founded, and they make good beer. I'm probably going to get an email from the Brewers Association, but it's to me it's one of those things that's nebulous, and I think it's kind of it's a slippery slope to start pointing at someone and saying, you're craft beer. And what really starts to bug me is if there's been breweries that we've all agreed were craft breweries, and then they get acquired or even partially acquired, just a minority investment by a foreign-owned company or a larger brewery, and then all of a sudden they're not craft beer. So, Boulevard Brewing is a good example. They were bought by Duvel. Firestone Walker, which is one of my favorite breweries on the planet out in Paso Robles, was just merged with Duvel Mork out of Belgium. So, are they not craft beer anymore? Like, I mean, quite frankly, F that. That's not cool. That's Firestone Walker. And I just, I fundamentally have a problem with that. So that's where I kind of split with my association on that.
All right, now, we're the only ones, very good, thank you from everybody on that. That's a great way to lay it out. We're wrapping up here. Want to leave you with one thing, and I don't know who caught the Tampa Bay Times article on Monday, talked about the beer industry, specifically Florida, how big it is. $14 billion is spent, right? And a lot of that is because of your hard work out there, what you're doing to supply the industry. You're getting the jobs for these people, and us on the panel, thank you for that, because you're really driving our job. So a couple other thank yous. Big thank you to Matt Willey, the Director of Marketing for the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. Marjorie Stone, I don't know where Marjorie's at, but again, this wouldn't have happened without their hard work. And again, and finally, want to thank our panelists up here. Great job, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll all be sticking around for happy hour, so thank you, and we'll see you out in the breakout rooms. Appreciate it.